Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Kevin Bonfield. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Adi. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. We're going to have some exciting conversation today. We're going to touch about the intersection of AI, data, and process, because you're also all about processes. So we're going to talk about, right, how AI and data, and of course AI, so how they all intersect together. And another very important topic is how processes and offshoring, how do they go together? Basically, having a global team, and why do you need processes, and how having processes align with having a global team and expanding that way. So definitely, I'm excited about this conversation. But first, let me introduce you with your bio.
Thank you.
Yes. So you work with clients to address complex business technology issues through setting clear strategic roadmaps and driving execution and scaling. You basically set up the strategy, and then from there, how do you execute in order to scale by using complex business and technology to address the complex business and technology issues? And I'm sure AI, processes, data, all of that is part of the complex issues that we face. And you bring over 25 years of consulting and technology operations experience to ensure strategy delivers results.
That's right.
That's incredible. So tell the audience a little bit about your journey and how did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Absolutely. So I started my career. I grew up in the UK. I went to university to get a law degree, and about 2/3 of the way through my law degree, I decided that wasn't going to be exciting enough for me, and so I went down the consulting path. I joined Bain and Company as a strategy consultant, and then moved around the world a little bit. Worked for a couple of startups, and then went to EDS. And EDS was a great place for me to kind of mix together that strategy background and technology as a way of understanding how they came together. And when HP bought EDS, I left shortly thereafter and then started my own company. And it's been focused on the intersection of operations and technology and how you can scale businesses since then. We work with private equity-backed companies, mid-market, lower mid-market companies, and they're facing these issues of how do you scale the business, so making 1 + 1 = 3 rather than just growing, and often that involves technology and process and a lot of change for the way that people have been operating, and so that's where we play, and we have fun doing it.
Absolutely. So let's give me an example of a project where you combined technology and process in order to scale.
Right. So one of the projects that we've worked on recently is in the call center space. So this is a company, a logistics company that has. I would say, think about it as a small call center in terms of the number of calls that are coming in. They have maybe 20,000 calls a week that arrive, and it's large enough that you actually have to think about how you structure your teams, and the metrics that need to be included, and how they're going to get more efficiency from that process. And so we started off by looking at all of the different queues they had. And the kind of performance they were getting out of it, and the teams and the way that they were structured. What we did was we've moved them down the path of having specialized teams. So rather than all calls come into everybody, we have specialized teams. We've laid out metrics for the work that we expect to get them done, that they expect their team members to do, both calls handled, and tickets that are being updated during the day. And we've provided reporting for them on a daily basis to say, did you achieve those objectives? And from the starting point of when we gave them those objectives, and which we agreed with them, right? Here's your SLA that we expect to achieve. We went from them, very infrequently meeting those SLAs to consistently meeting those SLAs over about a period of 6 weeks. But it was that daily reporting on the way back, and again, nothing too complex, right? It was, did you hit your KPIs? Did you hit your SLA? And then who was taking the calls? How much time were they spending on those calls? So that you could see what the performance within the team was looking like.
Yes, that's definitely the way to go. So for our listeners that are not familiar with the term, what can you define SLAs?
Yeah, so a service level agreement. And so in the call center world, often that's you want to answer 80% of your calls within 20 seconds, right? And so part of that means that you've got to set up the call center software the right way so that you can see what's going on. And there's a lot of advanced analytics which are in there. I find, early on in my career as a consultant, I found that we didn't have the data and we had to go and create the data, like we had to track things and tally marks and that kind of stuff. That's rarely the case now. The issue now is that we have so much data that we need to simplify it so people know what to focus on. And so we started off by focusing them on what's my SLA, my service level agreement, and what are the key performance indicators, the KPIs for each of the team members, and were they picking up the right number of calls? Were they in the queue, and so on?
Absolutely. So it is, it sounds so simple, right? I mean, after you do it, you go like, I should have, how come they didn't do it before? But
yeah,
it is fascinating because I encounter it with companies all the time. I mean, they will do processes, but don't measure it. So then how do you know what the output is? How will you be able to improve it? So what will be some of let's say we have listeners right now listening to us and they're trying to figure out, okay, this is something I'd like to implement. Sounds brilliant. I need to have some KPIs and metrics and gather data and be able to look at it. So if you have a company that is not keeping data or has too much data, what is your recommendation? Where can they start in order to have some semblance of organizational order and be able to utilize that data?
Well, I typically find that companies that are about this size have some data. So this was coming from their call center software. So there's companies out there where you can actually see this information, whether it's a Zoom or a Ring Central or another company. They will have data on the calls that are coming in, and who the team members are and how they're answering. So the starting point is see what data already exists within your team. And then the second piece is, what do you want the outcome to be? And see how you can align the data that you're looking at on a regular basis to the outcomes that you're trying to seek. The thing that we found made a massive difference wasn't talking about it in generalities and saying, generally we want to go over here and we want to answer the calls more frequently. It was literally getting it down to, here's the report, and I'm sending it to them at 7 a.m. every day, and them knowing where their problems were. And the first few days it was, thank you very much, this is helpful. Thank you, this is helpful. And about day 4 or day 5, it was, hey, can you help me understand what's going on here? Can we make a change here? And then they started getting engaged into, okay, I can now see these problems. So the problems would start off as things like, we missed our SLA, but it looked like somebody didn't come into work. Oh, so now I have to think about how I staff the team and when they're showing up during the day. Okay, great. That's great. And then it would be, well, it looks like we had the right number of team members there, but this particular person had a whole bunch of missed calls. Was it that they didn't log out from the system the day before, or is this a performance issue, right? So then that becomes I'm going to go and coach them. And if it happens again, I can see that that's a performance issue and not a coaching issue. So it became an iterative process to get better and better as we went.
Yes, I tell the companies that we work with that it's either a process problem, a people problem, or both whenever there are issues.
Right.
And that is exactly what you're saying, but they have to have data. They have to data to analyze if there is a
Right.
problem first. And also that brings also the question of processes. So how do you integrate processes into this evaluation?
Yeah, I mean, we will start with going through. We tend to operate at I would say, a relatively high level on process, right? We tend not to get down into the SOPs and training materials. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that we were connected, Adi, is that we tend to look at it more from the top, like how does work move through the system? And I'm trying to understand like what the big chunks of process are, and then where the handoffs are and where the complexities are. That's where we get started so that we can see where it is that we need to intervene. So in this particular case, one of the conversations we've had on an ongoing basis is who is in charge of the reporting, who's in charge of the staffing and the workforce planning for this team, because at the moment it looks like there's a function that nobody is capturing. It's done almost by osmosis, rather than somebody saying, this is my thing that I'm going to go and do, and then them being responsible and accountable for it.
Totally. And that is the reason why they have to have documented processes, because once you figure out what a process is, then in order for the people to achieve consistency, and in order for have predictability and then improve efficiency, they have to know what they're doing and following it, because otherwise you won't be able to have a consistent solution or a permanent solution, right?
That's right. So I have another client where we were working on a process for how we were building a procurement capability for them. And so one of the processes we built was, when we win a new job and we need to go and bid all of the materials out, when does that happen, right? I've got to tell you, one of the proudest moments was me seeing work that my team had done, like a process map that my team had done, like up on the wall at my client, because they were using it as a training aid to be able to say, okay, when it hits this point, then there's going to be a handoff. And so one of the interesting things that we found in this particular case was we were losing these awards. So the award would come in, and it should then come to this procurement team member to go and do the bids. It was getting lost in the process, right? There was a handoff from award from an estimator to a project manager, and then sometimes the project manager would get it to us. And so we changed the process, and we said, okay, when it gets awarded, it needs to go to two people at the same time, our buyer to go and get bids, and to the project manager. And that worked well, right? Now we've got the process and we're learning, but it wasn't an efficient process. This was an effective, but not an efficient process. It was effective because we were getting the communication done, but we were splitting it. But the efficiency wasn't there because the buyer was getting the information, maybe not at the right time. So they were going to have to come back and say, okay, are you ready for me to go out and actually bid this? And so there was almost a two-step that we went through here. We made it effective first, and now we've gone back and we've started to update the process to make it efficient.
That makes sense. And I like the definition of effective and efficient, the difference between them. I get this question a lot, is like, why processes? Why do companies need well-defined processes? So if you had to answer the question, what would you say?
I think it's all about predictability and consistency. So I have this thing, and I think that this is the same within my business as with my clients. I'm happy to go and solve problems, right? That's actually one of the things that I think that we do on a consistent basis. But what drains me more than anything else is having to solve the same problem again and again and again, rather than we've solved it, we've laid out the process for success in the future, and now we can move on to better problems, higher order problems, right? More interesting problems. And so that's the reason that I think process is important, is that you don't have to continue to go back and say, hey, did you do that thing that we've already talked about you doing, and we said it was important, but you didn't do it? This is about getting to that. I'm consistent in the way that I'm approaching things, and I don't have to worry about it anymore.
That's right. Now, you mentioned also offshoring and processes, meaning a global business that utilizes people that are not necessarily in your city, sometimes not in your country.
Right.
So how do you see processes and a global workforce working together?
Yeah, so to me, I look at this now, and Adi, when I was with EDS, I ran our offshore group. We called it Best Shore, and the idea was that there was a best place for these different functions, right? If I wanted to have direct client engagement, the best shore for that was to be in the US or the UK working directly with somebody. But the best shore for back office, call center, help desk, whatever it was, might be in a different country. So I ran this when I was at EDS, and at that time in the early 2000s. Thank you very much for the 25 years of experience thing, by the way, in my bio. That made me feel a little older than I do normally. But the opportunity for small and growing companies to use offshore talent or talent around the world was pretty limited, right? It was the big companies. You had to have a function that was at least 100 people that were going to do it, and it was going to be very consistent. Now, there are startups around the world who will get you one executive assistant, and you can start doing that, or you might even do part-time executive assistants, or you can use Fiverr for specific things. The opportunity to use teams around the world to build your business are now open to pretty much any business that wants to use them. But what that means is that they're not in the cubicle next to you, or they're not just down the street and you can go and have a conversation. And so getting that consistency around process becomes more important, so that you can take advantage of that team member who's in Manila or Mumbai.
Yes. And also internally, if you're working from home, or you not even working from home, even if you have different offices in different cities in the US and you need to collaborate, that comes into play there as well.
It does. Look, I mean, I think we proved to ourselves over the last few years that we can work from home. That there are, I would argue that there are things that we miss out on and we lose. We don't get the interaction face to face. We don't get to build the relationships and trust that maybe we did in the past. And we don't have what I think of as the side conversations, the water cooler conversations, where it's like, oh, by the way, blah, de blah, right? The 3-minute things that you would have done in the past. But we have worked out collectively how to work with people around the world, because you and I are talking now, and we chat regularly, but we're in different cities. One screen means that you can talk with somebody whether they're in Tampa or in a different country. So it's kind of democratized, I think, over the last few years.
Absolutely. You mentioned AI, the intersection between going back to processes, data, but also it also applies to recruiting, hiring, having the right processes in place, and AI. AI is such a hot topic.
Right.
What is your take on it? Where do you see AI? How does it fit in terms of process improvement and analyzing data?
Well, to me, there's what I'm seeing with some of my clients is that there's this desire to go down the AI path, right? That there's things that we believe that we should be able to automate that have some level of intelligence in the middle of them. But what we're seeing is that you can get tripped up very quickly, either on, I don't really have a process for how I'm going to do this, or I don't have the right data to be able to do it. And so, a recent client, we went down the path of how do we start to automate just basic functions, like we want to do reach outs to our existing customers who've said, I want a quote, and I want to be able to follow up with them and say, did you like that quote? Would you like to buy from us? And so on. And in the past, we'd had issues with email addresses. We didn't have the email addresses in the field. And so one change we made was, let's make that a required field in the system and not an optional field. The challenge then is you get no email at email. So people are actually putting the data in, but it's not good data. And so that just, when that happens, I can't automate the feedback. I can't put any kind of AI agent up against it, which would allow us to have a back and forth with a customer to see if they're ready to buy, because I don't have an email address. So or not a valid one anyway. And I know that there are tools out there that you can use to validate email addresses, but those are the things where it's about including that why training for team members so that they know why this is important. And the back and forth conversation we've had is, oh, that's more challenging to be able to put that information. I have to ask an extra question, or I've got to type it in. It's like, yes, it will take you an extra 30 seconds to get that done. It's going to save you an hour of work later on because we're going to be able to do all of these other automations as a result. And so the change management piece about it and describing how we're going to use it in a process becomes more and more important.
I agree. So if I hear you correctly,
Yep.
And I agree with that, is that we have to have a process well-defined. We have to make sure that we understand what data we actually want to use and need to use, and then automate it. Then use the AI tools in order to automate, not the other way around, because otherwise you are creating a process around the automation that you might need, might not. If you need it, then you were lucky and it's fine. But if you don't, then you are doing extra things or an extra process that is not really effective, using your words, right? I mean, you have effective, you have efficient. It's not effective, maybe a little bit efficient, but if it's not creating the final result that you want, that's a problem. So would you agree that that is the sequence? Identify the process, improve upon it, figure out what data you need, how to get it, and then automate?
Yeah, I think that what I see with my clients is that that's the path to go. That's the path to go through. If you try and automate it before you have those foundational elements in place, all that's going to happen is that you're going to get a consistently bad outcome, right? And a consistent and a faster bad outcome. And I don't think we want that. And so getting to good first and then getting to fast is the better path.
Agreed. Kevin, you are definitely knowledgeable. Our listeners right now, if they want to reach out to you, what will trigger them to reach out to you? Like, what things they're experiencing right now in their operations, in their businesses, that, yes, they should reach out to Kevin? What would those indicators be?
Yeah, so if you're trying to scale your operations and you're finding just a large amount of pain, or you're growing, but you don't seem to be able to see the improvement in financials on the bottom line. You know, you've added 50% of revenue, but your profit hasn't moved up because you've had to hire a bunch of people to spin the plates. Or if you're trying to get better at operations, but the technology isn't following, those are the kinds of places where we can come in and we can help. And one of the things I think I mentioned earlier on, we tend to work with a lot of private equity-backed companies. And one of the reasons is we love the urgency that comes along with it, right? We've got a defined time horizon, we've got a problem to solve. And so then it's much more of a question of how are we going to get this solved, rather than why should we even be here in the first place? And so I love that, because then it feels like we're all in it together and working as quickly as we can.
Great. So if they want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can go to our website. It's concentre.net. And I'm going to spell it because, and then I'll tell you a story. So it's CONCENTRE.net. So if I said Concentre to most people in the US, it would be like, oh, that's ER. Well, as we've worked out by now, I'm British. So obviously it's RE. And so concentre.net.
Excellent. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. It's been an excellent conversation, very interesting, and a lot of topics that we covered. So definitely our listeners, if you want to hear more, if you want to know more about Kevin, reach out to him. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Addie. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.